Hello everyone and welcome to the session on creating a first repository using Git. At the end of the session, student will be able to create first repository using Git. Now let us see the steps to create a repository using Git Init. Once Git is installed, navigate to the directory you want to place under version control and create an empty Git repository with Git Init. When you use Git Init, it creates a hidden folder that is .git. You can add the files to your repository, you can commit the changes, you can push the changes from local repository to the remote repository. But to do push and pull actions, we need to add a remote. To add a new remote, use the git remote add command on the terminal in the directory your repository is stored at. The git remote add command takes two arguments. First is a remote name, for example origin, and a remote URL. The example is git remote add origin and URL of remote repository. The other way to create a repository is by using Git Clone. The Git Clone command is used to copy an existing repository from server to a local machine. The example is Git Clone URL. This creates a directory with project name on the local machine containing all the files in the remote Git repository. This includes source files of the project as well as a .git subdirectory which contains the entire history and configuration for the project. Now let us see these techniques, Git Init and Git Clone on Git. I have created a new repo folder. I want to initialize a repository in this folder, that is new repo. So we should be on the same path. I will use command git init so that this will create empty repository, initialized empty git repository on this path. The folder name is .git, it is hidden. I will create a new text file called ABC. Now I want to add this text file to the staging area, so the command is git add dot. Now I want to perform commit, git commit -m, and I have to specify a message. I will give the message as first commit. Now the file is created and it is committed to the local repository. I want to push the changes from this local repository to the remote repository. So sign in to GitHub and then create a new repository. I will create repository as demo2. I want it as a public repository. I want to add a readme file, create a repository, copy the URL of the repository and go to git cmd again. Now we want to add remote, so the command is git remote add. Now we want to add remote as origin and paste the URL. Now the remote is added. Now you can use git push -u origin and branch name. Now let us check the current branch. With git branch, we are on master and we want to push the changes to the remote repository. So the command is git push -u origin master. So it will create a master branch on remote repository and it will push the changes from local repository to the remote repository. we need to sign in. Now after successful authentication, the changes are pushed to the master branch of remote repository. You can check the changes. Now there are two branches, main and master. The changes from local repository are pushed on remote repository and the branch is master. We had created abc.txt on local repository, and by using push, the changes are pushed to the remote repository. This is one way of creating a repository. Now let us see the second example, that is Git Clone. Now to use Git Clone, I will create a new folder. New repo 1, and we have to go to the folder new repo 1. Now as we have created this remote repository, I want to clone this remote repository to the local repository. So copy the URL of this repository and use the command git clone and paste the URL. So it will clone the remote repository to the local repository. So it is cloning. Now we can see the repository name. Demo2 was the remote repository's name. So the folder is created and it has a readme file. Now when you use git clone command, the repository is cloned and you can see the files from the repository in the folder. Now pause the video and find the answer. Which command should you use to initialize a new Git repository? A. Git bash, B. Git install, C. Git init, D. Git start. The answer is option C, Git init. In this session, we have seen how to create a repository. Thank you.